Welcome to She Built That podcast with Julie Nichols, where I interview female entrepreneurs about their journeys to business success. Today, my guest is Wendy White, a messaging strategist for coaches and consultants who are ready to become thought leaders. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Julie. I am so thrilled to be here. I'm so excited to see you start this podcast. So excited to see the reasons why you started this podcast. And I'm really excited to see where this goes.
I'm excited to share you with my network because I love what you do and everything you do is amazing. And what you do, I do a little bit of, but you're like the queen of messaging. And so I always think of myself as maybe I'm the princess of messaging, but Wendy's the queen of messaging.
The queen. Yes. So,
and I have learned so much from you and from connecting with you and, being in you've led women's groups and you've done so much and you're always trying something new. And I just really admire how you run your business. And that's why I'm even extra excited to have you on the show today. So I'm really excited to talk about all of that kind of stuff.
All right. Fantastic.
So I would love for you to first tell us a little bit about yourself and your business. And then I kind of want to go back in time and I would love to hear about how your business got started.
Absolutely. So as you said, I'm a messaging strategist for coaches and consultants who are ready to become thought leaders. By which I mean I work with women who are purpose-driven, who have created a business because they want to see a change in the world, and we need that right now, right? More than ever. Change in the world, particularly driven by women, right?
Agreed.
And so how I specifically help them is I teach them to confidently communicate that unique genius that they have and communicate that in all of the places, whether it's a website or social media or in speaking or in networking or in podcast interviews, with messaging that sings and messaging that sells because it's a business and it needs to make money. And because I want them to reach a greater audience and I want them to get hired more quickly and more simply and not have to jump through all of these hoops that, the online world puts out for us. So that's what I do now. I've been doing this work since 2014. And I got online in 2014 after I'd spent over a decade in international sales and business development. And when I was doing that work, I was helping small, unconventional companies to stand out and win clients in extremely competitive markets in the US, in Latin America, and in Europe. And so that's what I did before I got online.
Yeah. Oh my God. So how has all of that experience with, you were working internationally, you were doing all that. I want to know, what was that moment when you realized that messaging is what you wanted to focus on? Was there a moment that flipped that switch for you?
Absolutely. So I want to tell you a story about this. Can I tell you a story about this?
I would love to hear your story.
Because it was a series of moments and yet they all hang together. So most people know me for helping entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, to really communicate their unique genius. But what you probably don't know about me is that for a long time, I really struggled to embrace what was unique and my own genius. I was really torn between following this ordinary traditional path, like everybody else around me, and what I really wanted, which was to carve out my own path in the world and go have adventures abroad. And by the time I finished out college, sadly, following the pack and what everyone else was doing was totally winning out. And so when I graduated from college, I desperately wanted to move to Spain. Did I do that? I did not. I did not. I went to law school. And then I went into sales and business development in New York City. And to do that, I squashed down myself and my gifts and my own goals, really. And I tried to be just like everybody else. And I tried to want what they want. I mean, everyone I knew worked at Goldman Sachs. And I started thinking, well, I should be an investment banker, right? Which is insane. But I thought that was going to make me happy. And I thought it was going to make me successful. And I was wrong. It just made me lost and confused and frustrated. Have you ever been at a place like that in your life where you're like, trying to follow what everyone else says will bring you happiness and success and just like not working.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was an actor, so.
That,
And acting is all about trying to be that person that you think they
that they all
want
want
you
you
to
to be,
be.
right?
Yeah, and
Right?
constantly having to interview and just because auditioning, that's all it was, and trying to be that thing that you're trying to guess what they want you to be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So for me, I knew I was unhappy. I was living in New York City and I was unhappy and I knew I wanted something different. But the problem is at that point, I had gone to law school, I had worked in New York, and I'd listened to other people's ideas and ambitions for so long that when I was finally ready to break free and like do what I wanted, I couldn't even hear what I wanted anymore. Like I didn't even know what I wanted anymore because all I could hear was what other people wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So the Thanksgiving weekend came up and I went to Ecuador to visit my mother. So my mother had moved to Ecuador 4 years before, and she had founded this elementary school English program in this tiny indigenous village high up in the Andes. And as soon as I got there, everything about Ecuador spoke to me. The people and the language and the music and how they lived every single day. It just absolutely called to me. And even though I was pretty sure that I was risking any chance of professional success, I knew I had to follow this thing because it was really uniquely mine. It was not Goldman Sachs. It was not making tons of money in New York. It was something else. And so I'm like, I'm going to follow this thing. And at the back of my mind, I had this idea, I'll get to spend some time with my mom. And I hadn't done this in a very long time. So I packed up, I left everything in New York, and I moved to Ecuador in March. And it was absolutely glorious for 2 months.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it was glorious for 2 months. And then in May, my mother had a massive heart attack and died. She was 58. She was healthy. She was incredibly vibrant and alive. And then she wasn't. She was absolutely here. And then she was absolutely gone. And I'm getting chills as I say this.
I mean, my jaw is on the floor. Like, oh my God, she was so young.
Yeah.
And you guys were in Ecuador. Like,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
do you even, I can't even with this.
Yeah. So there were a lot of questions then, a lot of questions. But the big question for me was, do I go back to New York? Do I just go back to that life that everyone else was pursuing? Or do I stay here in this place and continue down this different path that I've started on? This path that she's left me, She's left me in the middle of her life. And so I took over her classes to finish out the school year. And I told them that I would come back to keep the program running for another year. So I spent another year living in Ecuador, teaching ESL in this tiny village high in the Andes. And I watched the sun come up over snow-capped active volcanoes from my apartment. And I went to indigenous weddings where the bride arrived on horseback. I danced in the streets in giant festivals, and I went to the Galapagos and I swam with marine iguanas. And I became fluent in Spanish. I became so fluent in Spanish, I forgot that I wasn't speaking English.
Wow.
I laughed a ton and I cried a lot and I made dear friends and I fell in love. And when that year was over, I knew that an ordinary life, no matter how successful by all the standards of other people, it was never going to be enough for me. And I knew that I needed to create my own path in the world based on my unique gifts and my unique goals, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I'm starting to get choked up.
Yeah.
Because that's such an incredible story, and what you went through, and how you came to the conclusion that you were not meant to live an ordinary life. Like that's something that. And how old were you when that happened?
I was 30.
Oh my God, and you were so young.
Yeah.
Like that's a revelation that some people don't have until they're well into their 60s, 70s. Like that's just incredible that then hit you then. So then what happened?
It did. So I walked away from 6-figure job offers in New York and I moved myself to Spain, where I'd wanted to move.
You went to Spain.
Start my own consulting firm. And I had no connections and I had no corporate reputation to open doors for me. I had no social media. This was before social media. I had no fancy marketing materials of any kind. I barely even had a website. Websites were new. But what I did have was absolute clarity about my own unique value and the ability to communicate it confidently on the phone, because we use the phone,
Remember the phone.
email, and in the boardroom. And so I started my own consulting company, and I landed some of Spain's most prestigious multinationals as clients on my own as an outsider, and in Spanish. Did I mention that? This was in Spanish.
So what were you selling?
So at that point, I was selling consulting services. I was selling competitive intelligence consulting services.
So what does that
And
mean?
it, it's funny. Competitive intelligence is always one of those areas that people are like, well, what is it? And I could explain it. And when I explain it, you're going to go, you were spies. And I'm going to go, no, I was the salesperson for spies, but let's just go with it. They were spies. It's
Okay, well, I'm glad that I don't no longer feel like a dum dum that I didn't know what competitive intelligence was. But
it's like legal corporate espionage.
okay, so it's like legal, but you're basically helping businesses to
Have their intelligence on other companies. Yeah.
got it. Okay.
Competitive reasons. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
It was this incredible professional success. It was the most incredible professional success of my career. And it was combined with this adventure of living in Madrid,
Yeah.
which is where I'd wanted to live, which made my heart sing. And it was just absolutely extraordinary. And so what I learned through all of this was that to create happiness and even professional fulfillment based on what other people wanted for me was just not going to work. It was a losing game. It got me nowhere. And embracing what was really unique to me and my goals and my gifts, that was really the key. And entrepreneurship can be the greatest path to that, to really expressing yourself and creating a life that you're truly here to live. But you need to embrace that unique genius, those unique goals, and be able to communicate it. Because when you do that, you can go anywhere, anywhere.
I want you to talk more about how you help women to express that genius of theirs.
Absolutely. So this is why I do what I do today, because it's so powerful and it's so important. Too many women have started their businesses to express themselves and pursue their own goals, their goals for their families, their goals for their lives, their professional goals. And they're not able to communicate this stuff. They're not able to communicate their unique genius. And they get caught up in other people's, all the mini-me's out there and all the people who say, do it my way, you can't do it your own way, and fit this model. And this is what you should want out of your business. And so all of these talented women end up sounding like everybody else. They end up coming across like everyone else, despite how unique and the gifts that they have to share, but they seem like everybody else. And so that's what I help them do, is to stop doing that so they can stand up, to really truly express their own unique genius and make sure they're following their own unique path.
So what does that look like? Like, to give me a little, maybe give me an example or walk me through when you start working with somebody to help them with their messaging. If you're working with them like one-on-one, let's say, what does that look like? How do you help them?
Sure. So when I started my business, I started out working one-on-one, and I found that almost everyone had this issue of not being able to communicate what they did and why anyone should care, and how are they different? Why should they be hired over anybody else? And they were going to copywriters and saying, help me with this copy. But like, since they didn't know what it was, like there's no way the copywriter could put like fun words on that, because what are you trying to say? And so I started doing messaging really early on because I really found that there was a need for it. And I worked one-on-one for a long time. And then I developed a process, and I eventually took it into a group format. And so the first thing that I always do with people is really come back to you and what you're here to do. This is the thing that kills me. Everyone online is very concerned with what the market wants to hear. And believe me, I was in sales for a very long time. We absolutely do care about the market and what they want to hear. But what I found is that so many women who have started out to create their own business and for their own reasons put all that aside and go directly to building what the market wants or saying what the market wants to hear without first solidifying what they're here to say and do. what is that thing that they only can bring to the world? What is that unique genius that they have? What do they stand for as a business that is distinct before looking at what the market wants to hear? And so the first thing that I have done with my clients for a very, very long time is really look at them and their mission first, to center their business for themselves so they don't get pulled off course into, well, and this can happen. I mean, this happened to me 2 years ago, 10 years into my business. I'm drifting off and ending up with somebody else's business instead of my business.
Hmm.
It helps center your business, but also it gives you that unique positioning in the market to be like, this is why you should hire me and not this other person. So I think that's a really important thing that everyone's skipping over is what is your mission, and to use that to really ground you.
Yeah, I mean, missions are clearly the cornerstone of every nonprofit. But, in business, that's something that I work with my own clients is like, okay, so if money were no object, like, because clearly you have a business, you need to make money, but like, what mark are you trying to make in the world? Like,
Yeah.
why are you doing this? Like, what's the point?
Absolutely. What is the thing you're trying to do? And I always like to start with enemies. I always like to start with, what is the enemy you're trying to defeat with your business?
Ooh.
What do you stand against? And because the reason I start with that, and sometimes people say, oh, I don't want to go negative. It's not about going negative. It's that for whatever reason, it is easier for us to articulate more powerfully and quicker what do we stand against than what do we stand for. Does that make sense?
Oh, 1,000,000%. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I find if you start there and ask yourself that, who are my enemies? And this can be at all different levels. And really get clear on that. And then, okay, in contrast, what do you stand for? If you're against this, then what does that mean you stand for? And it can be so much more precise and so much more clear in contrast. Now, when I say enemies, I don't mean people. I'm not talking about going out and trash talking the internet or your competitors. That would be insane. No. It can be methodologies. It can be practices. It can be bad advice. It can be just stuff happening in your industry. Things you want to change in the world. I mean, I articulated an enemy in my story. I mean, the enemy of following along with what everyone else was doing, when deep inside, I knew what I really wanted, but I shut myself down,
Oh, yeah. And I think that like people instinctually like know what they don't want, what they don't want to do, what they don't like. And so much of just defining what is that, then it becomes so much clearer. Like, oh, okay, I don't like this, so therefore I must like that. And
Absolutely.
I lead my clients through a very similar exercise because they love talking about what they hate. I mean, who doesn't?
Well, that's the thing. It's so easy. It's not hard, but let's say, what do you love? What does your business stand for? I mean, and it's always good stuff, but it's generic. It sounds like everybody else. It's not specific. Doesn't speak to anyone specifically. And so starting with that and getting clear on what your business stands for, what your stands against, having a distinct point of view for why you do what you do.
Wendy, I want you to share with me why women. Why do you work with women?
That's a good question. Always worked with women. It's who I'm just naturally drawn to work with. It's who I've naturally vibed with. But it's also what I feel called to do. I mean, the path that I have gone on in my life would have been more acceptable for a man. The choices that I've made throughout my life would have been more acceptable for a man. And now more than ever, women's voices, women's work, and women's thought leadership, it matters more than ever now. And particularly leading up to the most recent election, and certainly since then to a shocking degree, I have gotten the message very clearly, and I think a lot of us have, that women need to sit down and shut up and do as we're told. To which I say, hell no.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
To which I say, raise that voice, do it loudly.
I mean, and this is exactly why I started this podcast, because I felt so compelled to take action and to do something and to because I knew how to produce a podcast, because I knew that I knew so many incredible women whose stories needed to be reached by so many other women, that I was like, this is what I'm doing, and it's going to happen, and I'm going to make it happen. And now I'm seeing the response, because I'm seeing people who I've never met coming up to me at events, and they're like, I listen to your podcast and it's made such a difference. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, fuck yeah. Like, this is exactly what I wanted to do. Like, lifting up women's voices, especially at this moment in time, is so critical, because if we don't lift each other up, no one else will. No one cares about us. We care about us, and we need to support each other, and we need to lift each other up together, or we're just gonna fade away.
Well, and I think having alternate formats to do this in too is very smart. I think you've definitely seen, all the ripples that have gone through social media in the last, I would say, 6 weeks or so, where you're seeing algorithms changing, and you're seeing, Facebook in particular, where you're seeing it's very clear that certain opinions are now being watched and
filtered and removed from the conversation.
And a lot of people's reaction to that, understandably, I've seen a lot of people and relatives who have left Facebook and gone to Blue Sky. Totally fine. Get it. Totally get it. At the same time, if we remove ourselves from all our public spaces, if we don't stay connected in some ways, that's why I'm just saying the podcast as being a way to continue, the podcast, networking, whatever it is, to continue to connect. If the place we're going to connect isn't social, if social is not working for us as much as it did, or if there's the patriarchy working against us on social media, to continue to have places to connect, to speak up. That's why the podcast, I know you do so much with your local community in terms of networking. And
that's been a huge challenge for me too, of like, if my local group lives on Facebook, it's a Facebook group. And I know you have a lot of opinions on Facebook groups as well, but I can't trust Facebook, and I need to build my own. I need to build my own email list to make sure I can get in touch with those people if Facebook blows up, if it implodes, and I no longer have that group. Like, what am I going to do? So from day one, getting that email list together was hugely important to me, because we need a way to continue communicating, and I need to be able to reach those people no matter what happens with social media.
Absolutely. And so I think alternate platforms make a lot of sense. I mean, and since the moment I got on Facebook as a business person, people have been saying, let's get off Facebook. Like, everyone's been like hating it forever, and it comes in waves. But then, again, just what's happened since the election, and the quite obvious, pronouncements of Zuckerberg about how, like, we need the problem with American businesses, we don't have enough masculinity in it. And all of that stuff. It's like, and the erasing of women, the erasing of women at NASA. It's
deplorable.
It is. So having those connections through the podcast, that's actually why I'm doing this summit that I've got coming up.
Oh, tell us about your summit. And when is it?
Yeah. So, because I wanted to have a way to, again, reach women and connect women in a way that wasn't dependent on Zuckerberg. Or you can go to LinkedIn, but there's, it's another guy who owns that one, and and he's going to do what he's going to do. But yeah, so my summit is called, So You Want to Be a Thought Leader. And it is specifically for experienced women entrepreneurs who are, ready to pull away from the pack of cookie cutter entrepreneurs and be heard and hired and even hailed as thought leaders. And so it's a 3-day summit. It's happening April 8th through 10th. And it really is to elevate emerging women thought leaders and their voices. And it's really, really cool. I put out a call for speakers a few weeks ago, and I really wanted to bring together all the different things that you need as an emerging women thought leader. Obviously, marketing is in there because it has to be. And obviously, I'll bring the messaging piece. But it's really incredible, the mindset, the self-leadership, the executive presence, the standing, creating different ways of interacting with clients, just many different ways you can show up as a thought leader to an audience as well as to your clients. It's really, really amazing. We've got 19 incredible speakers.
Oh, wow,
And
that's a lot of speakers.
it is. It is. It's the first time I'm ever doing a summit. And what I'm finding that's so, I mean, it seems obvious, but I've seen summits for years, haven't gone to them, haven't been interested in them. They all look the same little talking heads. They look like pretty much the same topics over and over again. But what I'm finding so fascinating about this is that, first of all, I wanted to take the air out of what we're all told to do that doesn't work and talk about what actually does work. And so I've specifically asked my speakers to talk about why the conventional wisdom in their industry is wrong and what they're doing instead. Because I think it's really, really important to give women an opportunity to zig when everyone else is zagging. And what I have been amazed by in this is the feeling of collaboration in the summit. It's very different than, you've been in my challenges. I've run 18 challenges over the past 5 years, which is very much a solo thing. And this is very much me and 19 other women contributing, discussing, creating, bringing it all together. And it's really, really cool. And I didn't know that it was going to feel that different.
That sounds amazing. What's the format like? Is it all online?
So yeah, it's a virtual summit. It's a virtual summit. Have you been to a summit?
I don't think I have. No.
Yeah, I mean, people have been doing summits for years. And what so the format generally is pre-recorded presentations that drop over a series of days. But the summits that I've been to, I have a friend who ran a summit last year that I thought was absolutely spectacular. And what I loved about it was that it felt like a live moving event. It didn't feel like here's a bunch of videos, which doesn't really, doesn't feel like an event. It just feels like here's a bunch of videos that you get for a limited amount of time. And that's not. And so I really wanted to go out of my way to create a live event. And so we're doing a lot of live conversations and live presentations and things to really bring people together to discuss and have that live aspect.
That is so great. I would love for you to share, we're getting close to the end of our time together, but I would love for you to share, how can people learn more about you? Where can they find you, both your services as a messaging strategist as well as information on the summit?
Absolutely. So you can find me at my website, which is wendywhite.com. And I think you've got all my socials and everything else. Probably the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. Everywhere else, it's like, who knows? They keep changing algorithms. Who knows if I can actually, I keep posting in places and I can never find stuff again. So that's the best way to do that. The summit is actually happening April 8th through the 10th. And I'm going to be opening that up. You'll be able to find it as of April 21st, which is a few days from now.
March 21st?
March 21st. Yeah.
Okay. You said April. So I just wanted to make sure.
I'm sorry. March 21st is when you'll actually be able to see it. I'm building it right now. I'm building it. There's nothing to see right now.
Okay, great. Okay, good.
March 21st is when they'll actually be able to see the actual thing. And then April 8th through 10th is the summit.
Oh,
yeah.
Perfect. All right, cool. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so incredible to hear your backstory and the story about your mother. I know that was a long time ago, but my condolences. That had to have been just horrible. And thank you so much for being so open and honest about your story. It was It was very inspirational to me, at least, and I'm sure to many other people. So thanks again. And I'm sure you'll be back at some point because you have a lot to say and I love listening to you talk. So thank you for being with us today. And everyone, I'm Julie Nichols. Thank you so much for listening to the She Built That podcast. I own a marketing agency. I do marketing for small businesses. And if you would like to reach out to me to learn more, you can find me at julienicholsmarketing.com. That's Julie, Nichols marketing.com. And thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.